Postmodernism was a movement that developed in the middle of the 20th century and died later in the 90s. Followed after the Modernism movement, Postmodernism was a literary movement with a style and concept that represented a departure from modernism. Postmodernism is taking the same concepts of modernism, but in such a different approach that it seems as though it almost mocks modernism in a way. While both movements focus on profound and deep themes, they differ in their perspective.
Modernism attempts to see the world from as many points of view as possible, whereas postmodernism takes on a very skeptical perspective which questions truths and fact. Postmodernism is a reaction or rejection of modernism. In other terms, it's a new generation of modernism. Modernists believe in order as they oppose against disorder. However, postmodernism acknowledges this order and also allows it to coexist with disorder.
Modernism presents something tragic and expects it to be mourned for and taken as a loss. Postmodernism doesn't mourn for the idea, but rather celebrates it. Postmodernism embraces complexity, contradiction, ambiguity, and diversity. An anonymous postmodernist said, "The world is meaningless. Let's not pretend that art can make meaning then. Let's just play with nonsense."
So what influences postmodernism? Clearly, the modernism movement had a huge influence. Without modernism, postmodernism would not have a subject to question. Also, the two main historical events of World War II and the revolution in science and technology were what considered to be the catalyst to the emergence of postmodernism.
Now that we have a brief history of the postmodernism movement, let's take a look at the popular poets of the time. Firstly, let's take a look at Richard Brautigan. He was an author and poet who lived from January 30th, 1935 to September 16th, 1984. He is most famous for his poem, All Watched Over by Machines of Love and Grace, written in 1967. The lack of format, interesting yet dark topics, and satire can be found throughout his poetry.
Next, we have Charles Simic. While some of his works can be dark, it has a beautiful message to it. Charles Simic was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize for his work in 1983, 1986, and 1987. He finally won one in 1990 for his famous poem, The World Doesn't End.
Lastly, we have Rita Dove. She was born August 28, 1952, and is one of the most famous postmodernism poets alive today. She was the first African American to have served as the Poet Laureate consultant in the Library of Congress. One of her most famous works is a book of poetry called Thomas and Beulah, published in 1986.
And not only is the postmodernism movement conveyed through poetry, but through visual arts as well. Popular forms of postmodernism art are pop art, fluxus, and feminist art. Basically, art that was inherently political and simultaneously engaged with and critical of commercial mass culture. Many of these works of art designates arts as neither painting nor sculpture, but art of the mind rather than art of the eye.
A very popular postmodern artist goes by the name of Banksy. Banksy is an England-based graffiti artist, political activist, film director, and painter. Although his work is widely celebrated, his identity remains unknown. However, here is a picture of what people claim to be him. A famous work of his is called Flower Bomber. This graffiti juxtaposes a rider with a bouquet of flowers swapped for his Molotov cocktail. Fun fact, Banksy is also the creator of Disneyland, a parody of Disneyland. This amusement park is now closed, and all the timber and fixtures from Disneyland are being sent to the jungle refugee camp.
Another popular postmodern artist is Andy Warhol. He's an American artist who was a huge figure in the world of pop art. His works explore celebrity culture and advertisements. One of his most popular works is the Campbell soup can made in 1962. Another famous work of his is the Marilyn Monroe pop art made in the same year. Now that we have looked at the art of postmodernism movement, let's move on to music, looking at two composers of the time.
Alfred Schnitzke was born on November 1934 in the Soviet Union. His music is known for its powerful impact, rarely leaving the listener neutral, attracting some while alienating others. It is marked by an intense expressiveness, an unpredictable flow of ideas, and a natural lyricism. Some of his most famous pieces include Chain of Thought and The Turtle and the Crane.
Secondly, we have John Corigliano, another famous composer of the postmodernism movement. Born on February 16, 1938, Corigliano is an American composer of classical music. While most of his works have been for full symphony orchestras, he has also written concertos for clarinet and oboe. Famous works include Etude Fantasy and Winging It.
Now that we have seen the many forms in which postmodernism is conveyed in the arts, did you know that there's also a dance form? Postmodernist dance is particularly characterized by its various styles and movements, as it is a fusion of high dance, such as classical ballet and modern dance, and popular dance, such as jazz dance, folk, ballroom dancing, and breakdancing. Now here's a clip of postmodern dance.
As you can see, postmodernism was a rich and deep movement that influenced many. Although such have died down in the later 90s, forms of postmodernism can still be seen in media today as a result of its beauty and meaning.